I'm Peter Marks, theater critic for The Washington Post.
And I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli, and I write for The New York Times. And welcome to another episode of Marks and Vincentelli, a podcast where we like to keep you up to date with theater. And that also means right now what's going on with theater is COVID still. The current reality of COVID and how it affects our little neck of the woods industry. So personally, I want to know all about the latest variant, which has been nicknamed Kraken, because in our house, the past 15 years, we've been using the expression release the Kraken for no good reason at all. And now that there's a variant called Kraken, it's really spoiling our fun. So that's great. We have a guest for that today.
So we're releasing the Kraken today with a wonderful resource. Well, hopefully we're not releasing the Kraken. We're suppressing the Kraken with Blythe Adamson, Dr. Blythe Adamson, an infectious epidemiologist who serves as a COVID advisor to Broadway shows, among many other organizations and institutions, the NBA among them. Dr. Adamson heads a company that she founded called Infectious Economics. And she's here to help us understand, once again, the current state of the pandemic and how that information will help you. Dr. Adamson, thank you for being with us again today. I think this is is this the third or fourth time we've had you on? I can't remember, but you're sort of our go-to guest.
Peter, when you love, you don't count. Don't be
good. I like that. Love means never having to count. Don't
count.
I love joining you.
Well, thank you. So Blythe, we're obviously entering year 3 of our cognition, our understanding, our attempts to understand this pandemic. And I have to say, I'm completely confused now about where we are as theater goers and what the guidelines are for attending, what's going on with theater companies and theaters in terms of their rules and how they're developing them. Can you talk to us a little bit about where you think we are and where you are as head of infectious economics, where we are as an attendance culture, a gathering culture, and the rules that we should be thinking about and what they are?
Well, thank you, Peter, for inviting me to come back again. Although it's been 3 years into the pandemic, we're 18 months into Broadway after having reopened in the summer of 2021. So now where we sit in January of 2023 is a really healthy place. I'm so encouraged. This time last year, 6 months into having reopened, it was a really devastating Omicron outbreak. So many people were sick. So many shows were canceling. And I was really worried about protecting the health of company members, of audiences coming. And it was a really tense time. And now in January 2023, a year later, I am so encouraged and so much more comfortable with how things are operating now. I guess you can look at it 2 ways. One, how much virus is circulating around, spreading backstage, spreading among audiences. There's a ton of virus. How many people are in the Broadway community are dying, are having amputated body parts? The amount of loss that we saw in February and March of 2020, before we had a vaccine, that was real. Amy Rice recently captured a lot of that burden in her new documentary, Broadway Rising, about the health costs that really took on people. And now we've been open for 18 months. There have not been any Broadway COVID-related deaths that I'm aware of. There have been very few, if any, COVID-related hospitalizations. And we're really at a time now that vaccinated people with immunity, are able to fight through COVID infections and have it be so much more of a mild illness compared to what it was before. So if we look at CDC's new dashboard that's launched just this week, they now map out respiratory hospitalizations, not just for COVID, but also flu and RSV. And it's a really interesting story for different age groups. So when we look at kids, we're seeing we saw a huge spike in hospitalizations for RSV. That was really spreading in a big burden among children. In young people in their 20s through 40s were really not seeing very much illness at all. For people in their 50s, most of the hospitalizations were from flu this year. And then for people over 65, it was COVID-related hospitalizations that were one of the ones spiking for respiratory illnesses. So I think who the vulnerable people are still, how we want to think about different risks, it really does depend on your age. But I'm very encouraged about where Broadway sits now and the opportunity for really encouraging people to come back to these shows because there's a lot of great things on Broadway right now.
One of the things that I think we were talking about before we started the podcast informally was the fact that there seems to be all kinds of directions talking about audience members, and it doesn't seem to be affected by this. It doesn't matter if the theater is big or small or how many people are in the cast. It's all over the place. Like some places require mask audiences, others are, we recommend a mask, others don't say anything. So I guess there's no there are no uniform rules, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's pretty much each theater or company decides what is best for them in terms of the audience. And then we'll get to what's happening, behind the stage. But, so there's no uniform direction, right?
Right. There's not a uniform directive right now. And I think that's the right thing to do. Different shows attract different types of audiences, and also shows that where you can get a subscription to a season, those groups may feel an obligation to remain committed to the policies that they offered to ticket holders when they first, purchased a whole season of tickets. And so,
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Right. So you can imagine someone who's, elderly and, very scared of taking risks. And the reason they bought this, a whole season of tickets is because their understanding at the time was it was going to be a whole season masked. There may be a different consideration or feeling of obligation that those shows have to remain committed to that, what they've said at the beginning of the season. And then for other independent shows, many shows attract different demographics of people. And so I could imagine shows that are attracting much younger audiences or a lot more out-of-town guests. They may choose to have it be optional or recommended, whereas other shows that are attracting an audience skewed to an older age may find that their ticket sales and the comfort of their attendees is better when they're enforcing a masked policy. So I'm comfortable with it ranging between and, have empathy for the different considerations that these groups have when making their decisions.
Are you finding, Blythe, that there's a residual psychological dimension to this that is somewhat depressing still attendance in certain spheres? Because I sort of feel, when I go to the theater, many times I see empty seats that I don't think I saw before the pandemic. Are we still on an upward climb back to total comfort of all the people who went to theater before the pandemic? Do you sense that? Are there any surveys that give us any idea where we are in terms of reaching that level of simpatico behavior, feeling that for the majority of people who went to theater before?
Well, I've got a few theories that explain why those butts are missing from seats. For pre-pandemic, New York City had a workforce that was coming into the office every single day. So when you think about local New Yorkers, living in Manhattan or, commuting into Midtown or FiDi every day for their jobs, it was much easier to add on a show after work with your colleagues. But we know now that these office spaces throughout New York City are maybe half full. Mondays, Fridays, we can tell, we can use other signals like how many hot dog stands or like how many hot dogs is the guy on the corner going through this on a Monday versus a Thursday or pre-pandemic. So I do think that there's an amount where we've lost the crowd, where it was very convenient to tag on a show on a work day and enjoy friendship. And I think we've got a important thing we're going to have to navigate, and figuring out how to engage those hybrid workers now, where they're just coming in a few days a month, maybe, to the city.
Yeah, that's true.
And then there's this category of, complete out of town tourism coming in. And I think about tourists coming in from different parts of the United States and tourists coming in from places like China, where both of them are going to have different constraints and considerations that I think will absolutely affect their likelihood of coming to see a show. Domestically, it's still not a good look when we have when we have shows canceled because of COVID. It's a huge financial investment for a family to fly to New York City, purchase these really expensive tickets. They've just got this one night they can see it, and then it's canceled because of COVID. It was a big part of why they were coming. That's still, a risk where people may be postponing those trips a little longer until they can have more confidence that that's not going to be happening for them. And then for tourists that are coming from places like China, I see a big emerging threat to their ability to travel and to come, as China goes through this very difficult transition of COVID zero to figuring out how to operate in a way that allows for some spread of disease. It's a very, very delicate balance. And due to many really interesting features about urban density there and their workforces, their biggest threat is to collapse of the healthcare system should it become overloaded with everyone becoming infected at the same time. And so, there's going to continue to be some challenges that may relate to why we may see a decrease in tourism from China to the US over the next 6 to 12 months. As China figures out how to responsibly allow there to be tolerance for COVID cases in China, other threats are to things like manufacturing plants, factories having to close down because of outbreaks that happen. And that will affect Broadway in other ways, mainly in all of the things that we import from China that are related to putting on a show. So you may see sets that are affected, costumes may be different. There's going to be other limitations that delicate balance in China may make it more difficult for the supply and demand of some of these essential things that we depend on.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I am curious about, for instance, like one of the things that I find reassuring, like I just got a booster like last week or 10 days ago, and which I've lost track on how many boosters, but whatever, it's the latest model. But I'm also seeing statistics that the percentage of people getting boosters is kind of low. Is that something in general you think could be a concern in the long term, that people are just kind of forgetting about or not bothering to get boosted?
Great question.
Does it help? I mean, my doctor was like, yeah, get boosted. You might as well just do it. It's good. Just, they're updated all the time. And so should we be concerned in general about this kind of low rate of people getting boosters?
Well, it's a huge scientific debate right now. We've got some people, these two famous scientists are publicly warring about this right now in the media. Team Offit, Team Topol, well-respected scientists taking completely different opinions on this. So I'll offer my personal perspective, which is that young, healthy people that received a full series of vaccine, we are finding are still well protected from severe disease. Yet elderly people who may have just their bodies are having trouble remembering how to fight against it. They're the ones that need to be reminded with that booster. They're the ones where it's that benefit is just decaying over time. And so an extra boost will be able to increase my confidence that they're not going to end up in the hospital with COVID if they're exposed. Now, one of the reasons why it's tricky is whether or not people care about vaccines because they're trying to prevent people from dying and going to the hospital, or whether they think vaccines are going to make there be no more cases anymore.
Right.
And block infection. Well, honestly, some of the main reduction in risk of transmission from the vaccine, that benefit only lasts a few months, and it's not perfect. And it's not really feasible to just be reboosting everyone every 3 months. It's not necessarily a good use of resources. Now, it may be something where we really need to stay on top of it in a nursing home because that extra benefit will be really important. But from my perspective, our goal is no longer try to have there be no cases. That was never my personal goal. It's let's reduce the burden of this disease on us and, keep our loved ones from dying from this.
Interesting. Blythe, I remember when I first interviewed you, you had these really meticulous strategies that when you were working with theaters. I remember all the way back to Passover, one of the first shows on Broadway to have a consultant like Dr. Adamson working with them. What has changed in terms of how you work with theaters as they what rules or what strategies have evolved in terms of keeping companies healthy and making the determination of when or when not to take more drastic measures toward controlling whatever happens backstage or in dressing rooms or on stage?
I love that, Peter, that question, because there's one thing in my mind that hasn't changed, and it's really what I'm trying to optimize for. We want to keep people healthy, but also do it in a cost-effective, responsible way. So there's not unlimited amounts of money to spend on, doing every single thing you could. You need to make wise investments. So at the beginning, and we do that through layering together a combination of things. That's what we used to call the Swiss cheese model, where a slice of Swiss cheese has holes in it, just as like only wearing a mask, you can still get infected. But when you combine together the masking, the testing, the air, all these things. Now, at the very beginning with Passover, it was necessary and important to implement all of the tools that we had in our toolbox. And that was because there was a lot of threat, a lot of uncertainty. And we wanted to give that show and many after that the highest likelihood of success. Now we're at a point where we do have a lot more certainty and understanding about this virus, about how long people are contagious once they're infected, who's really at risk of having bad outcomes, where the most, I can walk you to places backstage where I would say, you can stand in this 4 square foot area. This is the most likely location where there will be a transmission between 2 people. So the certainty of where and when, it would happen on this day and this time range, like we really have learned so much. And the responsible use of resources and what kind of that allocation is to the different things you can layer together does look different, but we're still optimizing for the same thing. So I would say that backstage right now, we are decreasing the frequency of testing. Hopefully we'll phase that out soon. There's going to be a new safety rider coming out very soon. But by the time this podcast airs, the new safety rider may be out that's guiding companies on what the requirements are for testing backstage. Masking is changing and lightening. I think that is it's happening in a responsible way. And one of the things that is here to stay is the improved air quality. that we have backstage and in the front of house. And that's thanks to the addition of these portable HEPA air filters that most of the landlords, the theater owners, have invested in and sprinkled in all these tight, unventilated areas now have substantially cleaner air that's reducing the spread of not just COVID, but also flu, RSV, if there's dust, in these small areas. So those investments are going to benefit the health of company members, of audience members for long into the future, giving them cleaner air and better respiratory health. So, those were upfront investments in those devices. If listeners of your podcast are more interested, you can get good ones on Amazon from $50 to $150 for your apartment, for your home. So I'm really happy to see that change is here to stay.
And that's also great for instance, like cast members or tech people who had allergies maybe and that kind of stuff. Like before, I mean, those old, and we're talking just about Broadway here, but those Broadway theaters, some of them were really old. Yes. I mean, I've been backstage in some of them, and I was just like, oh my God, we are in the 19th century. So at least
because,
that is.
Yeah. It's because they're historical landmark buildings. They fall under different building codes than many of our modern buildings. And so these Broadway theaters had not previously had all of the updates that you might expect a modern commercial building would have for pumping clean air through the building.
Mm-hmm. Interestingly, Blythe, when I got COVID, the way I found out was testing before an interview with a playwright that I was required to get. And that, it was, fascinatingly, it was really theater related that I even discovered I had it. I had a mild case, fortunately. But I'm wondering, in terms of when you say the testing is, whatever whatever's evolving, maybe people are curious, why are we still canceling performances? What is happening? I thought we were in a situation where understudies were beefed up, for example, but there's still, we still run across, I would say a couple of times a month, shows canceling performances. It's not.
That just happened to me last week. Yeah.
Peter, it's so fascinating because from the very beginnings, conversations I have with producers are, you don't have enough understudies. Here, let me give, I game theoried out for every single show. Right. Combination of people would need to be out before you would cancel. And the solution is always get more understudies. Now we're 18 months in, almost no one got more understudies. So I think they just thought it was cost prohibitive that they're like, well, I'm going to gamble the risk. And so those it's ending up canceling.
So it's cheaper to cancel a few performances than to have an understudy on staff.
Well, so when I game out, I build decision trees for them. The average cost of canceling a show is $120,000. If you don't get any understudies, maybe your risk of canceling a show is 10%. And then if you get an extra understudy, maybe the risk is 2%. So you just multiply those probabilities by the cost of a canceled show. And then you compare that with the added cost of that extra understudy needed to get that, 8 percentage point decrease. Right. So anyway, that's the type of decision modeling calculations that are easy to do. Yeah, shockingly, not all producers are rational, I find, and so they're just going to take some risks. But yeah, it's amazing to me that how much they think of things on a week by week basis instead of kind of a 3-month time horizon with all these probabilities.
Well, it's good that they're not rational. Otherwise, they would not be in that business, and we would have no Broadway theater, because this is a business where most shows tank and lose money. So let's rejoice that they're not rational. Yeah. But it's interesting because actually I was supposed to go see a Merrily We Roll Along a couple of weeks ago, and when I turned up at the theater, there was a note that Lindsay Mendez, one of the three leads, was out. And there was no reason. I don't know if it was, I don't know what it was, but anyway, she was out. But the show was on. They had an understudy. She went on. I chose not to go to that performance because I wanted to see Lindsay Mendez, but the show went on. The cancellation I had last week was a 2-person show where clearly if someone is out, you can't have an understudy for an off-Broadway show. That's just not, when the creators are doing their own show, you can't do. And I think it might affect smaller shows more. That's more of a risk for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've talked about this before, I think on our very first one, which shows are most vulnerable. And it really is the newer shows and the smaller shows that are most vulnerable. Whereas shows that have been on Broadway for more than a decade, there are so many people that have played those roles before that if someone's out, we're seeing people flying across the country to sub in, even for shows that are on tour. So those shows have a lot more of a cushion of people that they can call on before they have to cancel.
So the already more vulnerable are even more vulnerable.
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly.
Right. We have to think that, if you're a shoestring show, in maybe in another city or off Broadway, part of the charm of those pieces is they are put together very primitively in terms of how much they can spend. That's part of the ethos of creation sometimes. So, you can excuse it more. You can understand it. But I've had friends, Blythe, who've come from the South or the West Coast and have shown up in the city and, really eager to see things. They're inveterate theater goers, and to have it, taken away from them, really dampens their confidence in the experience. I mean, this has, I think, lasting impact. When we measure all the negative impacts on attendance and what people expect, how does the theater, do you think, are there other things the theater can do to boost confidence or raise the level of, is it an education process? Is it just time? Are there things that theaters can do to reassure customers that they're not going to waste their time buying a ticket for something upcoming? Or is that just impossible to?
You know what? Okay, so I haven't ever thought about this before, about what programs or what ways we could do to overcome this challenge, because it's not going away anytime soon. But we talked about those people who've traveled from out of town. They've only got this one night to see a show. We could think about ways where different shows could partner together, where this show is canceled, you get a free ticket you can choose one of these 4 other shows.
That's a great idea.
That will give you a seat tonight.
Brilliant.
And there could be some kind of
idea.
Exchange, plan in place, and we can work out the financial part on the back end, but basically give you an assurance that if you're coming from out of town and your show gets canceled, that you can choose one of these other 4 shows, and if they've got a seat, you're going to be top priority to be able to get into it. Some kind of program like that, where it's going to take us working together, doing things in a way that we haven't before, where we're turning something that used to be just competition for people into a competitive advantage for everyone.
Yeah, that's a good idea. There's nothing quite like being, I've had this experience in London when you're sitting in a hotel room, on a night when you were supposed to go to the theater, and it's like, wasteland, you feel. Not that it's not wonderful to do other things in these cities, but something about that is deeply, but I love that idea of some kind of clearinghouse. Maybe the Broadway League could set something up where there was this. I can't imagine that there isn't a way to do that with software or something.
Yeah, because they're usually not all canceled on the same night. It's different nights, but it could give that there's insurance policies.
I just can't believe how brilliant and simple that is. And I just can't believe it doesn't exist. And you could imagine the same thing for off-Broadway too.
Absolutely.
Like the Roundabout and MTC and all those kind of similar-ish Lincoln Center Theater.
Because it's overwhelming to figure if your show gets canceled, to figure out, oh gosh, now do I get my money back, or how would I don't even know what has seats tonight, or so if it could be easy, I think that would be really attractive.
I'm interested in you saying that this isn't going to go away anytime soon. I'm trying to figure out, Blythe, how, we've had flu, all our lives. I mean, there have been illnesses spreading in public places. I got coughs and colds constantly in the theater before all this happened. Is it the media coverage? Is it the social media world that has intensified our fear or worries about this? I mean, how much of it is based in a reality of the more detrimental effects of COVID than other epidemics that has made this something where we have to permanently think of the ways to mitigate the effects? What is that?
My answer is completely different than what you're going to expect, and people are not going to like hearing it. I mean, it's flack later for this, I'm sure. What I think has changed is the cast members' willingness to call out of a show. And it's not always COVID. And there have been cancellations of shows because they don't have enough cast members, but it's not because of a COVID outbreak. It's because enough people have called out that night and they don't have enough understudies. So what do you mean
called out? They just say, I'm not coming in tonight for whatever reason? Is that...
we called out sick. I see. Right.
Call out. Yes. So from my understanding, I wasn't involved with the Broadway community to have a deep understanding of what things were like before COVID. But from a lot of deep discussions with stage managers at shows across Broadway, what I've learned is that the threshold for how bad something has to be for a person to not show up that night is a lot lower than it was before the pandemic, because I think that motto of like the show must go on, everyone shows up, even if you're sick, the attitude. Now, I was part of trying to change that attitude of like, if you feel sick at all, there's no shame, please call out. I don't want you toughing through it. Yet where it's landed us, and sometimes the stage managers say like this younger generation of people, they just, don't have the, I'm only saying this because it's a consistent thing I've heard across so many, across all Broadway shows. I'm not naming, this is not like one specific person. So part of it makes me wonder, I know many of the people that have called out, it's not because they're out with COVID, but you could imagine if pre-COVID, no one called out for anything. You were absolutely committed to, there's pride in never having missed a show. And post-COVID, it's very different than that now because we have people out for 10 days. So it's much more acceptable now to not show up for different reasons. So
I think my jaw just dropped. No, it's not that I don't like it or not. I mean, I find it interesting, and I can't say I'm surprised, but
that's what I mean. Where I don't think that's changing soon, because if it's people's understanding of like what commitment means. Does commitment mean you've never missed a show, or does commitment mean when you show up,
I'm looking after myself.
You're giving the best of you. That's what commitment means. And so I don't know if
I do think, because, it's interesting because it kind of like, this is a little off topic, but it does connect to what you're just saying, because there was this interview with a cast member of 1776 a few months ago that went kind of viral, and there was a lot of discussion about it because she said that she was giving 75% when she was doing a performance. She was not giving 100% of herself when she was doing a performance. And I remember people going nuts about it. And I can't say I was surprised that she said it out loud. But I wasn't entirely surprised that's the attitude she chose to say, because I think there has been a change in attitudes to, yes, the commitment to the collective endeavor. Because I do think of a show as a collective endeavor. That also involves the audience. It's a pact between the show and the audience and the people in the show. And I remember that interview was really remarkable to me that she would say it. And I think it kind of reaches out. And when I went to see 1776, the show went on the night I was supposed to saw it, but I had something like 5 understudy on. There was like 5 roles, and of course that creates a ripple because someone who's doing a smaller part is covering maybe for a bigger part. And then, so it creates this kind of domino effect where everything was impacted that night at the show.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me when we step back and think what's happening to the bigger workforce in America. We're seeing that shift to hybrid workers. We're seeing, a ton of people who were previously employed just choose not to be engaged in the workforce anymore. There's huge changes happening in America and what commitment to your job, to your company is like. And it's fascinating to me to narrow down and see how does that play out within the specific industry of Broadway. For these people who,
really
for their jobs, they have to show up in person. But, there are a lot of other industries where they can go to hybrid or to full remote. What does that mean for this bigger cultural change? It would be weird if that didn't happen at all on Broadway.
Yeah, I think there's one of the interesting things, I think there's also a flip side to it. It's not, people calling out may not, part of it may be, not feeling well and worrying about one's health, but also worrying about spreading it to other people. It's so still unclear how you get it. Inevitably, I don't know about you guys, but when someone tells me they've got COVID, even today, my first question I always want to be was, well, how'd you get it? Like as if they know.
Yeah.
You're always speculating, oh, I went to something or other, which is there's really no way to know.
Oh, I know when I do my investigations, but I know exactly who gives it to who when I do
You do.
I do.
Right, because you're a scientist.
Would never know. Most people would never know. But I have to sequence everyone's viruses and link it to the contact tracing from the COVID safety managers and testing results and do a whole genomic epidemiology investigation to be like, okay, this person give it to this person here in this place at this time, backstage.
I guess it would be so much more helpful maybe for the health of an industry if one really, if there was more specificity about like when you're really infectious, how long you're shedding. I still don't understand all that. Maybe that aspect of it, certainly in a communal business like the theater where you're basically on top of each other, constantly through the rehearsal and performance process. It would be, I don't know how that seems like a very expensive prospect to try to really.
No, it's not that bad. Honestly, Broadway they were both the canary in the coal mine of whenever new variants would come, we'd see it hit Broadway first. We'd learn what's different about this new variant compared to the last ones and how long people are infectious or what are the symptoms of this new one, how much is it spreading before people turn positive on a rapid antigen. And we've learned so much from the intensity and how deeply we're observing what's going on there to be able to change policies in real time and protect these individuals. But the time-based, you're out for 10 days, that's really an arbitrary number that was chosen by CDC. The length that people should be out is different for every individual. It's different for each variant. And there are tools that we have for figuring out how we can bring them back as soon as possible. But it also depends on how critical that individual is. I've been in this situation a lot of times. It ends up being musicians sometimes that, there's no one, no subs available. Like, this is a really critical role. When can we bring this person back? So depending on the situation, there are reasons why you really do want to bring someone back sooner when you're confident that they're feeling good and no longer contagious. There's always a steady rate of people popping positive on every show across Broadway, but it's being managed really responsibly. in my mind. And it's not scary anymore. And it's not scary because people are recovering quickly. The new variants continue to be mild. And one of the things you asked me at the beginning, Peter, was when should the policies change? What would need to happen for us to double down again, add back in all the testing, require masking? And right now, I don't think any of those changes are needed. The viruses and variants that are circulating, continue to be mild. If we were to detect a variant coming from another country where it was a lot more serious threat of death, of bad outcomes, the vaccine is not protecting people, that all of a sudden hospitalizations are spiking again, then it would be the right thing to do to reevaluate public policies to protect people's health, to protect our healthcare system's resilience and capacity for those things. But it's a hard job figuring out. It's easy to detect new variants. It's hard to detect, are the health outcomes different for a new variant? So, we've got wastewater that we're doing from planes. We're picking up on all these new things. But for me, the policy shouldn't get more strict unless we are under threat of a new variant that, we're a lot more likely to die from than we were the recent ones.
If the variant is symbolized by like a black skull, I'll know that. I'll that. We'll have to. We'll talk about that in the next one, and we won't name it after a country or anything. We'll name it like something like Monstro or Destructor.
The other unique thing we've learned from Broadway, that the burden that these company members have had to bear, and that scientists have learned a lot from, is how quickly people are getting reinfected. Honestly, if you're exposed to COVID all the time, just as a part of your job, let's say you were a person that was you don't even care if you get COVID anymore. You've had it multiple times. You're fine each time. And you just live a lifestyle where you're getting exposed all the time. You're probably going to get reinfected every 3 months. And one of the reasons is that that's kind of how often we're seeing new variants emerge. So while you may be protected from that exact same strain that you just had, new ones are going to keep coming to New York City all the time. And if you're getting exposed over and over, you will get reinfected again. And, it's not great that happens. Long COVID does happen in a small number of people, and that's real and can really be challenging for people. We haven't solved that problem yet, but I will be concerned, if a new variant were to emerge that's meaningfully different in how bad it is for your health. I think the media's been overhyping, this one's more transmissible. And they think it's more transmissible just because it's becoming the dominant strain. But that's not necessarily true. It just means that people are susceptible to it again. They've never seen this one before. So it's an interesting place to be in epidemiology right now.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you brought up Merrily We Roll Along, and I think of, that show about innocence in some ways, about a more innocent time in one's life. And there's a lyric in that show, make it like it was. And I think of, it will never be like it was. Our knowledge, in a way it's like sad, in a way it's good that we know more, because I think it has value for other health issues that might crop up in the future in theater or other public gathering spaces. I don't think it's bad that we're all more vigilant, and that actually arms us and educates us. I don't think that ultimately it hasn't made me any less enthusiastic about theater. It has not. It makes me cherish, in a way, the experience of sharing this with other people in a collective space. So, I'm glad that we have the tools, and those things have enlarged the ability to cope with this.
I've got one last thing then to pitch you. And again, I haven't thought about this before, but it's building on what you're both describing about how important community is and gathering in these spaces together. And earlier I described the missing butts in seats. Some of them are because people are not coming to offices in New York City anymore. They're not coming as often. Maybe they're coming a few days a week. But those workplaces, they're also losing out on creativity that happens because people are coming together and building relationships and building communities. So in addition to the pitch I gave you about how I think that there should be backup shows that you get free tickets, a transfer of your ticket to, there could be an opportunity for new partnerships between shows and workplaces, companies, so that there's an alignment between, let's say this bank is going to have mandate in-person work on Wednesdays, and they want to draw people into the office instead of just forcing them to come. What they want to do is have people come, but there's more of a pressure now for the days people come into New York City to have it be community and relationship building, because workplaces know that spillover benefit to then when everyone goes back to their home and works together on Zoom, that they're better as a team once they have these relationships. Well, I think that there could be some kind of corporate program where we start filling those seats with, you're incentivizing your workers to come back on these days, and we're going to offer your team the ability to go see one of these shows on this day of the month, or, these days of the month that we're bringing everyone back. So really more, let's bring New York City back to life. Let's bring these workplaces back. Instead of forcing people to come, we induce them to come, and we're purposeful about the opportunity for community building, relationship building, and experiencing the arts together.
I love this.
Yeah,
I love this.
me too.
I love this so much. It's so brilliant. And so we have to figure out a way from all the big banks to listen to this podcast. It's clearly,
well, I think we're all struggling. I mean, that's why I think it's such an interesting connection to think about what's happening in the American workforce in general. What is happening on Broadway? How are they related? How can we support each other? But it means we need to be creative about understanding why these things are happening and how can we come up with new programs to overcome those and make it a win-win for everyone.
I just did a story about the return of workshops and how important it is for creative people to be in the room together to create, even though Zoom was a okay substitute. This really, there's no replacement for being together, really. That alchemy that doesn't really translate even digitally sometimes. So anyway, Blythe, we know you have to run. We are grateful for you to speak to us about this always. I think it's hugely important. And we are so much better informed after talking to you and reassured about our whole journey through theater. So thank you.
Well,
thank you.
I'll have to keep throwing out these economist ideas if I want to keep being invited back after people aren't worried about COVID anymore.
Always. You're always welcome, Blythe. Elizabeth, Blythe's insights are always so invaluable. I'm so glad we had her back on.
I love how she went off-roading today. She totally she left the highway and she took the side, the Waze side detour that, Waze is always sending you on. That's always often a lot more interesting than the New Jersey Turnpike. So that's it for us. That was okay. That was totally action-packed. And we'll be back soon. We've been cooking up some goodies for you guys, and you won't want to miss them. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and we encourage you, if there are people who you're really interested in hearing from, maybe, people that we're missing, we try to comb the territory for interesting people to bring to you. So let us know. Elizabeth and I are obviously both on Twitter. Her handle is @eVincentelli, and mine is @PeterMarksDrama.
And we're also, we're both on post.news with the same handles.
Exactly.
So very easy to find if you've decided to leave Twitter or not join Twitter. I totally understand the decision. So anyway, we're trying to cover those two fronts now. And of course, the most direct way to find us is marksvincentelli.substack.com, where you can also subscribe, and we'll try to deliver the good. And we will never send out understudies, even though understudies are great. It'll be us. It'll be us.
Very funny. Very nicely done, Elizabeth.
Fully committed in every sense of the word.
That's interesting. Understudies. I like that. I'm
saying that, but if we can find an understudy, I mean,
there's no substitute for you, Elizabeth, especially when you talk about SpongeBob or Sondheim. Anyway, so we'll say goodbye for now.